Hello and welcome back. My name is Randy Scrapper, and this is my colleague Brian Quinn. And today we're continuing our discussion around cloud cost management, specifically around phase two, steps 7 and 8 in our implementation checklist. So, as we started down our journey of CCM implementation, our first step was to install the application as well as the plugins. As we start to get to the next step, we're going to be configuring the user permissions as well as linking credentials to secure access and retrieve data. As I mentioned before, the implementation checklist can be found on the ServiceNow community. I added a QR code here to quickly get you there. We will be talking about configuration phase two today, setting up the CCM specific permissions as well as mapping aliases to cloud credentials. Now, these steps are very tedious and could be a little bit time consuming to make sure that they're done correctly. However, Ryan, the head of the global or cloud operations, he's going to be needing to reach out to the cloud admins to get these things done. So there are specific permissions in each of the cloud providers that need to be set in order for CCM to be running. Now, I'm not going to go through each individual step here. However, Brian will be walking through the individual steps in the demo here shortly. Next, you'll have to map the credential aliases to the crowd credentials. And this can be done by, just mapping it back to, these CCM, these credentials that are mapped here. I've added a QR code here as well to walk you through the individual steps, as well as Brian will walk you through the individual steps needed to get this step done as well. So without further ado, these steps are a little tedious, like I said. Brian's going to go ahead and jump in and show us how to get this done. Thanks, Brian. It's up to you.
Thank you, Randy. In today's demo, we'll cover setting up each of the cloud providers to enable cloud cost management to download the billing data, generate recommendations, and then act on those recommendations, in addition to setting up the credential aliases in the ServiceNow instance. To start, we'll take a look at Azure. For Azure, we need to set up two different permissions in order to enable all the features for cloud cost management. The first will be granting the enrollment reader role to a service principal that will enable cloud cost management to download the billing data. The second piece will be creating a custom role with specific permissions to enable cloud cost management to generate the recommendations and take actions on those recommendations. Before granting the enrollment reader role, we do need to gather some information first. The first bit of information we need is the EA enrollment number. And to retrieve that, we can go to Cost Management and Billing, and then go down to Properties, and there'll be Billing Account ID, and this is the EA enrollment number. So we can copy that off and save that on the side for later use. The next piece of information we need is the Azure Tenant ID, which is actually available right here. So we can copy this value off as well. Next, we will need the Service Principal Object ID. In order to get that, we can actually get that in a few different ways, but the way I am going to retrieve it is we will go to Management Groups, and we will look at the tenant root group. Now at this point, we've already set up Cloud Discovery in our ServiceNow instance, so we should already have an IAM role attached to the root management group that will enable Cloud Discovery to access all of the subscriptions. So in this tenant root group, under role assignments, we should be able to find our service principal that's set up for Cloud Discovery with the reader role or some equivalent role already attached. we will be granting the enrollment reader role to this same service principal. So the same service principal can be used for both discovery or service graph connector and cloud cost management. So if we click here to open up the service principal, we need to copy the object ID, and we will save that object ID off to the side. All right, and that is the 3 pieces of information that we need to grant the enrollment reader role. So next, we can go to the Azure documentation for assigning enterprise agreement roles to service principals. We can scroll down. One thing we will need to generate is a unique GUID. So we scroll down. There is a link to an online GUID generator. So you can use this to generate a unique GUID to use for the API call that we're about to use to attach the role to the service principal. Once you've generated that GUID, we can go down here and we can open up the role assignments put REST API article. And on this article, there's a button to try it. So we will click that, and we will have to sign in to our Azure account. And we can set up the API call in order to assign the enrollment reader role. So first, for billing account name, we can copy and paste in our EA enrollment number. For the billing role assignment name, we will copy and paste in the GUID that we generated. For API version, we will leave alone. Content type, we will leave alone. And for the body, we will paste in a JSON blob that has the properties object, and then the principal ID, principal tenant ID, and role definition ID. And this can be found in the ServiceNow documentation if you would like to copy and paste it. For principal ID, we will put in the object ID for our service principal. So we'll paste that in. For principal tenant ID, we will paste in the tenant ID that we copied. And for the EA account ID, we will paste in the EA enrollment number. And that should be everything that we need to substitute. This ID right here is for the enrollment reader role. So we can scroll down a little bit further, click run, and we should get a 200 status code to show that the enrollment reader role was properly assigned. So now our service principal should have permissions to download the billing data. The next piece is to make sure that the same service principal has permissions to generate recommendations in each of the subscriptions and take actions as needed for those recommendations. So to do that, we will go back to our Azure portal, and we will go back to the tenant group management group. And this time we will create a new role. So we will go to roles, and we can actually go to add a custom role, and we can give it a custom role name. So in this case, I'll do ServiceNow Cloud Cost Management. And there are a list of permissions that we will need to add in the ServiceNow documentation. I actually have a JSON that I'm going to use to make this process a little quicker. So that will load in all of the permissions that Cloud Cost Management needs for each of the Azure subscriptions. So you'll see things like start and deallocate for virtual machines. So this would be for your business hours, right, to start and stop a VM, delete a VM for unused VMs, write to update for right sizing, several read operations, including reading the recommendations, generate the recommendations, delete, forecasting. So all the various permissions that Cloud Cost Management will need for recommendations and acting on those recommendations. So if you don't have that JSON, already built, you can go through and select all 16 of these permissions when creating your role. So now I can go next. Next, and you can review. This is basically the same JSON that I had taken from a file. Go to next, and we can go ahead and create. Now that we have our custom cloud cost management role, we need to assign it to the root management group. So if we go to role assignments, we can go to add role assignment. For the role, we should be able to find our new cloud cost management role. And for the members, we will leave it as user group or service principal, select members. And we can search for our service principal. That we are using for cloud discovery and cloud cost management, and we will select that. And then we can review and assign. And now that service principal should have all of the appropriate permissions, and this will because we did this in the tenant root group, it will propagate to all of the subscriptions that are part of this Azure tenant. So that completes the setup in Azure. Next, we will move on to setting up AWS. Here we are on the AWS console, logged into the AWS billing account that we want to configure for cloud cost management. Now, in order for cloud cost management to download the billing data, we need to configure a data export to export the billing data into an S3 bucket. In order to configure that, we can go to billing and cost management. And then once this page loads, we will look for the data exports module. And here we can create a new data export. And we need to create a legacy cost and usage report export. The legacy cost and usage report is currently the only report type that cloud cost management supports. We will give this export a name, in this case ServiceNow Cloud Cost Management. We need to make sure include resource IDs is checked off, and we also need to make sure refresh automatically is checked. For the report granularity, you can select either hourly or daily. In this case, I'm going to leave it as hourly to get the most granular data possible. For report versioning, we need to make sure that create new report version is selected. And for compression type, you can select either zip or gzip. In this case, I'm going to select gzip. And then for the S3 bucket, we need to configure what S3 bucket to export this data into. Then click configure. I'm going to have it create a brand new bucket for exporting this data. We'll give it a relevant name. We'll choose what region we want the bucket to exist in. And for bucket policy, we will leave this as the default settings. Now we can create the bucket. The S3 path prefix is optional. In this case, I'm going to give it a path prefix, and that's just a path in the S3 bucket that will be created. Now, when we go to set up the billing download job in your ServiceNow instance, you will need to know the S3 path prefix, the S3 bucket, and the report name. But now that we've filled all of this out, we can click Create Report. And it will start the process of creating the report and doing the first export of the billing data into the S3 bucket. The next piece we need to set up is IAM permissions. Cloud Cost Management does need permissions to some APIs. So in order to configure that access, we need to go to the IAM service and configure that. So we will start by creating an IAM policy. So we'll create a new policy. And we will actually need two separate policies. The first one, so we'll set this to JSON. The first one, these JSON policies are available on the ServiceNow doc site. So I'm going to copy from there and paste it in. So what I've done is I've taken the S3 permissions that are broken up into two different sections, and also the cost and usage report permissions, and put this into this policy. This policy will be specific for the billing account, and we will create a second policy that are all the permissions that will be needed across all of the different accounts within the AWS organization. So as you can see, there are a couple places where we need to make some substitutions. So first we need the bucket name. So we will take that bucket name that we created when we created the data export and paste that in here. We'll paste in the bucket name here as well. We also need the AWS master account ID. Since I'm already logged into the master account or the billing account, I can copy the account ID from here and paste it in. A little bit further down, we also need to set the resource here. In this case, I believe that for the cost and usage report, this particular API only supports all resources, so we'll replace this with an asterisk so that it can do a describe report for all the cost and usage reports. All right, that is all of the permissions that we need to set up in this policy, so we can click Next. We will give it a policy name. As I mentioned, this is only for this. These permissions are only required for the billing account. So I'll put billing account in the name and create the policy. All right, now we'll create a second policy. And we will again choose JSON. Again, we will copy and paste some of the JSON permissions from the ServiceNow documentation. In this case, it is the CloudWatch permissions, the EC2 permissions, the Cost Explorer permissions, and the auto scaling permissions. So these permissions will be required across all of the AWS accounts in your organization. So we've pasted that in. There are no edits needed. So we will click Next. We'll give it a policy name to reflect that it's for cloud cost management, and it should be attached and created in all accounts. And we can create the policy. Now that we've created the policies, we need to attach the policies depending on how you authenticate to your AWS billing account. You can either have an IAM user that is directly authenticating to the billing account, or you could be doing assume role in order to authenticate into the billing account. In this case, I have it set up for assume role, so I will go to roles and I will find the role that we use to assume into the billing account, and I will add permissions and attached policies. And if I search for ServiceNow cost management, both the all accounts and billing account, I will add those permissions. And now when Cloud Cost Management does the assume role and into this billing account, it will now have the proper permissions. Now the same process will have to be done in all of your AWS accounts. In all the other AWS accounts, you will only have to create the all accounts policy with the CloudWatch, EC2, Cost Explorer, and auto scaling permissions, and attach it to the IAM user or the role that exists in all of those accounts. Now that can be done in many different ways. You might be using stack sets. You could use Terraform. There are other tools to kind of deploy these policies and attach them to the roles or IAM users in bulk across your entire organization. So you should speak to your AWS subject matter expert to see how they handle deploying these roles in bulk. But once all those permissions are in place, your AWS organization should be configured for cloud cost management. So next we'll take a look at Google Cloud and how to set up Google Cloud for cloud cost management. Here we are on the Google Cloud console. Just like AWS, for Google Cloud, we will have to set up a billing data export in order for cloud cost management to download the billing data. In order to do that, we can go to the billing module and open up our billing account, and then go to billing export. We need to configure a detailed usage cost export, so we can click on edit settings. We select the project we want to export the data into, and this is going to export it into a BigQuery data set. So we can create a new data set for this purpose. So we can do ServiceNow CCM, create the data set, and click Save. Okay, now that we have the detailed usage cost data being exported to BigQuery, we need to make sure that the proper APIs are enabled for all of our GCP projects. So if we go to APIs and Services, and we select one of our projects, there are several APIs that are required. Compute Engine, Recommender API, BigQuery API, Cloud Resource Manager. There's also 3 additional ones that I actually don't have enabled on this project. So we have to go and enable them through this Enable APIs and Services. We can search for the first missing one, which is BigQuery Data Transfer. You can select that and enable it. And now we can go back, and there are 2 other ones. Now all of these APIs that are required to be enabled are in the Cloud Cost Management documentation. So please reference the docs page for the latest list of APIs that need to be enabled. The next one that we need to enable is Cloud SQL Admin. So we'll go ahead and activate that one as well. And finally, the Batch API. All right, now that all the APIs are enabled for this GCP project, we would have to verify that these APIs are also activated for all the other GCP projects. Now that we have the billing export configured and the APIs enabled, now we have to set up the IAM permissions. In order to do that, we can go to IAM and admin, and then to IAM. And here we want to make sure we're working at the organization level. So we will select the organization. And we'll go down to roles. We will create a custom role. So we can create a new role. We can give it a relevant title for Cloud Cost Management. Give it an ID. And we can start assigning permissions. Again, this is the Cloud Cost Management docs page. We'll have the list of permissions that need to be added. So we will start adding them here. BigQuery needs some. All right. And then we will continue to search for all of the relevant permissions. Now that we have all of our permissions selected, we can check them all off and make sure each page has all of them checked off. And click Add. We should see all of those permissions assigned, and we can click Create to create that role. Now that that role has been created, we can go attach the role to the service account. So now we can go back to IAM, and we'll want to find the service account that is used for discovery. And we will click Edit, and we will click Add Role. And now we can search for our new role. And we can click Save. All right, so now the service account that we have configured in the ServiceNow instance and the credential table should have permissions to all the necessary APIs. So that wraps up our configuration in Google. And now we'll head over to the ServiceNow instance to wrap up the demo with the last piece of assigning credential aliases to our credentials. Now that we've completed the configuration for all of our cloud providers, we need to make sure that Cloud Cost Management knows which credentials to use for downloading the billing data and for generating recommendations. So to do that, we will go to our credentials table, and we will filter for all of our Cloud Cost Management related credentials. And we'll open these up one at a time. And what we'll want to do is go to Credential Alias, click the lock button, and we will search for the Cloud InfraStack CCM aliases. Now these will only be available if you have activated the Cloud InfraStack plugin, which is the recommended configuration. If you have not activated the plugin, then these aliases will not exist, and you can actually skip this step. But like I said, the recommended configuration would be to activate this plugin and to assign these aliases. So since we have an alias for each of the provider, in this case I'm working on an Azure credential, I'll select the Azure alias, and click Update. And I'll repeat that process for my GCP and AWS credentials as well. Now for AWS, I do have two credentials here, and we do have to set it for both credentials. Now, if you are using Cloud Discovery, at this point, everything is properly configured. If you are using Service Graph Connector, there is one additional thing that we will need to check. So if we go to Service Accounts, this will bring up a list of all service accounts that we will be looking at for Cloud Cost Management and Cloud Discovery. If you are using Service Graph Connector, this Discovery Credentials field will probably be empty for all of your service accounts. You'll need to make sure that the proper credential is specified here, particularly for Azure and for Google. For AWS, you can either assign the credential or you can leave the credential blank if you want to set up credentialless access for Cloud Cost Management. In that case, you should reference the previous video on Cloud Discovery. There is a link for setting up AWS Cloud Discovery that covers setting up assume role and the credentialless Cloud Discovery. So even if you're not actually using Cloud Discovery, that assume role setup is also used by Cloud Cost Management. So I would recommend referencing that video in order to set that up and make sure that Cloud Cost Management has the proper access to all of the AWS accounts. So that wraps things up for the demo. And now I'll pass it back to Randy to go through a quick summary of where we are on the implementation journey and wrap things up. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And to kind of summarize what we've talked about today, we have finished up our phase two configuration where we talked about configure those specific permissions for each of the different environments as well as linking up those cloud credentials. As we're moving into our further discussion, we're moving into data management. This is where we're going to be able to schedule and validate billing data, imports, and so we can start to do, tracking of cost. So, thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.